We're live. Okay, I'm Kat Farron,
Yay!
and hiya, hello everybody. I am joined by who is Dr. Yogi, and I am faceless at the moment because this is, well, I know it's sad because this is what my software is doing, but the news is Dr. Yogi's face is much prettier than mine. So
I'm not sure about that, Kat.
I'm going to see if I can bring back my face, and hopefully I'm going to be tapping away and finding a way of doing this. But in the meantime, I just wanted to thank you for joining us, Andrew.
It's my pleasure.
It's wonderful to see you. We've known each other for years now. So it is so amazing to see you and to see how you have built up Dr. Yogi, your yoga and anatomy specialism, quite rightly, because you really do have something very special to offer as
thank you.
well, yeah, somebody with a very detailed knowledge of anatomy who is also, am I allowed to call you a yoga geek?
Yeah, I've been called worse. So
You've been called worse. Yeah, well, I'll call you a yoga geek because you really do know your stuff. So I'm hoping for some lovely, for some lovely comments and from some thumbs up from people because I'm feeling a bit lonesome with no video. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to kick off with a question that I have for you, Andrew. So I have a tweaky sacroiliac joint. So this comes across as something which is, it feels like a sort of pain in my pelvis, which isn't a pain. It's just something which kind of clicks in and out of joint. And I think it's a bit weird. It's something that a lot of yogis have. Why is it that us yogis have it? And how, well, what can we do about it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, what did you say? You call it a tweaky?
Yeah, it's kind of tweaky. It feels funny.
Is that a technical term?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, so I think, so this is a great question. It's a really great topic to cover. I think what I want to start by saying is that in terms of like persistent pain, and I know this isn't exactly what you're talking about. You're not saying that you have a super like painful area here, but when it comes to persistent pain, what the science world is realizing through tons and tons of amazing research is that the vast majority of pain is not coming from the musculoskeletal system. It's actually coming from the nervous system. Okay, so that's something really interesting to think about. We a lot of us think about pain literally originating from the physical area where we're feeling it, and we're realizing that actually it's not always coming from those tissues, but it's actually coming from like a higher level. It's coming from the nervous system. So that's something worth mentioning here. The sacroiliac joint, I should have brought my little skeleton with me actually. The sacroiliac joint, for those who don't know, if you think of your pelvis, which is this amazing bony basin that is connecting your spine to your legs, the sacrum is the amazing wedge-shaped bone at the back of your pelvis, and it can also be included as part of the spine. So it can be included as one of the lower parts of the spine, and then underneath it is connected to your tailbone or your coccyx. And there's a lot of misconceptions about this area of the body, and I think the one thing that I want to share with everyone is that this area by nature is stable. Like it has to be stable, because it is, in terms of the skeletal system, it is basically the center of that system. It is the part that as I've said, connects all these other elements. And the term stability is important to talk about. I know I'm kind of going off on tangents here, but it'll all hopefully tie together. So I'm in sunny California, and
stop rubbing it in.
You know, I'm sorry. And this is like one of the most beautiful areas of the world. And the negative side of living here is earthquakes. So we had an earthquake recently, and the buildings here are designed to be stable. And what that means is that if an earthquake happens, the building moves subtly, and it basically almost absorbs the movement. And then once the earthquake is past, the building comes back to equilibrium. And if the building was rigid, it wouldn't be able to move and adjust, it would collapse. So stability is this basically ability to withstand external force and then come back to equilibrium. So the same thing happens in our pelvis. The bones of our pelvis are essentially fused, but there is a very subtle amount of movement that is able to take place. And I'm talking like millimeters of movement, like movement that you wouldn't be able to feel by touch. Okay, so very, very subtle. And then what happens is that when we make all these amazing movements, when we're running up a flight of stairs or we're doing our yoga practice, the pelvis is very, very subtly adjusting to almost absorb the shock and transmit the force through the body. Okay, so that's the first thing I'll say. So if you can visualize a Roman bridge, okay, the central stone is called a keystone, and it's slightly wedge shaped, and it is one of the strongest architectural structures. So that bridge can hold, I'm making this up, at maybe 100 times its own weight. Whereas if that central stone was completely vertical and its edges, the bridge would maybe hold 10 times its weight before it collapsed. So again, we have this actual wedge structure in our body that is the sacrum that once again adds to this sense of stability. So the reason why I'm saying this is because I kind of, with my teaching, I want to change people's perception of the body, and I want them to see their body as being robust and being strong and being resilient. But in yoga, we can often think of the sacroiliac joint as being this problem area. And if you already have in your mind that this is an area that you can have a lot of issues with, it's almost like you're setting yourself up for a problem. Okay. And yes, a lot of people do experience pain in this region. Pain essentially tells us that there is a problem somewhere in our body or somewhere in our life, because now we look at pain using the biopsychosocial model. So we look at our social interactions, we look at our biology, we look at stress levels, we look at what's going on in our spiritual life, and all these elements come into play and they affect our experience. So the pain tells us there's something going on in some sphere of our life, but it doesn't tell us where the pain is coming from. It doesn't tell us what the issue is, and it doesn't tell us what to do about it. Okay, so it gives us a certain amount of information, but it doesn't give us the full picture. Okay, so but having said that, we talked about this small amount of movement that's available within the pelvis. What can happen in yoga is we can almost treat the pelvis as if it's made up of separate parts, and really the pelvis wants to be treated as one entire unit that moves as a unit. And sometimes what we can do is we can energetically pull one side of the pelvis in one direction and the other side in the opposite direction, and potentially, and there's very little research that kind of can tell us this for sure, but potentially what we can do there is begin to overstrain some of the ligaments and make the pelvis itself slightly less stable than it's designed to be. Okay, and that's for some of us. So an example would be if you can visualize yourself in revolved chair. Yeah, so you're in chair pose and then you're twisting to one direction. Often what we hear teachers say is you must keep the knees in one line. They don't want the student to allow the opposite knee to gently creep forward as you twist. But if you're pulling that opposite side back and then you're twisting in the other direction, you're potentially kind of pulling the pelvis in two opposite directions. So does that make sense? So so if you have like a sensitive pelvis and you're experiencing sensations in this area, I would recommend allowing the pelvis to move in the direction subtly of the main force. So if you're twisting to the right, allow the pelvis to subtly turn to the right, so that the left knee can subtly jut forward, if that makes sense. So has that answered your question, or have I
no, I really like that,
jumped
because
around so much that you got lost?
Great. I like that because it's like, don't take your twist so seriously, Kat.
Yeah.
because I love a twist. But you're right. I think especially in the old school, back when I started and I was an Ashtanga practitioner, it was very much like, you know, go as far around as you can and keep your pelvis stable. And because I don't think that that was a very known thing back then. Um, the kind
Yeah,
of going
because
we have now.
we actually have limited information about the
Mhm.
sacroiliac joint and the
Right.
pelvis itself. Like the bones of the pelvis, it's just an area that there hasn't been a ton of research and energy put into, and hopefully that will change in the coming years. But so when you really go and research these areas, there's a kind of limited amount of information about it. And yeah, there was this big school of thought of fix the pelvis to the floor and then
That's
twist
right.
one side, and then what you're doing energetically is pulling the different parts of the pelvis in different directions.
Right.
And I think often what has happened in yoga, I feel, is that there's been this movement where we've ended up over cueing and we've ended up using too much instruction. We end up micromanaging people.
Mhm.
And we've done that, and I've been guilty of that in the past as well. We've kind
Mm.
of done that because we think that we're helping people, but actually what it might have done is it might have tipped the pendulum the other way, and it we might have ended up not helping people as much as we hoped. So I think for me, it's much more about encouraging people to explore these movements. How does it feel when you gently fix the pelvis and twist?
Mhm.
Then how does it feel to allow the pelvis to move subtly? And then
Mhm.
decide for yourself what is the best
What is the
choice
most
for
appropriate?
you in that moment.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. That does answer my question. Thank you. Great question from Raki. Could you speak
Hi, Raki.
generally about keeping your knees happy? And that knees happy advice gets another thumbs up. I think everybody here probably needs to keep their knees happy. So how do
Yeah.
we do that?
So I love Raki. She's one of my she's made a little sniffy nose. Raki's one of my I taught Raki anatomy on her teacher training years ago, and she's asked me some very interesting questions. We've all had like a good laugh in the group because she's comes up with these amazing questions. So yeah, how do you keep knees happy? I so this is a struggle for everyone, but for me, it's all about tuning in to how your knees feel. So how they feel during a practice, and then also how they feel in the days after a practice. Um, we're all unique beings, and there's never going to be one cue or one piece of advice that works for everyone. So at the end of the day, as teachers, I think it's our responsibility once again to help cultivate awareness in our students. And if you're practicing at home on your own, it's about using the practice to really feel into your body, and that will help you over time to decide again, are you making the right choices for yourself? We kneel a lot in yoga in different positions, or we put a lot of weight on our knees on the mat. Support the knee. Use a nice folded blanket. You can actually keep a folded blanket tucked under your mat, so there's actually a padded area. So you don't have to keep kind of using or moving the blanket forward and back. Yeah, I think again, the knee is this area of the body that there's been so much negative messaging around that we can end up feeling that the knee is about to spontaneously combust, and our knees are super, super, super robust. We're using our knees in every moment of kind of waking life, and they're super, super resilient. We have cues like, micro bend the knee to protect the knee, keep the knee above the ankle to protect the knee, activate the foot to protect the knee. And I think that all this messaging kind of continues to kind of consolidate this idea that the knee is fragile, and the knee is actually anti-fragile. So I think to keep your knees happy, change the dialogue that you have about your knee. And also know that if your knee makes sounds, if you have cracking noise in your knee, unless that is associated with pain, that is actually the sign of a healthy joint. Like I have come across so many people who basically limit their movement or limit how much yoga they practice because their knee makes noises. And often it's just your knee telling you or reminding you that it's there and it's okay.
Oh, interesting.
So I hope that again answers the question. So for me, it's a lot of it is about the way that we view your body. If
Yeah.
you view your body in a positive light and you think of your body as being tough and resilient and able to heal, and then it can really change the way you feel and then also change what you do with your body. So I think for me, that's a big key element.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that does help. Let us know if that helps, Heather and Raki. That'd be great to hear your thoughts. This is a great question from Carla. Thanks for this. Why do we get pins and needles in our arms, for instance, when laying down with our arms, hands over our heads, or in that banana pose? I love that banana pose, by the way.
Pins and needles.
Pins
Yeah.
and needles.
So so we can get pins and needles for different reasons. We've all had pins and needles, say, for example, when we've been sat on the sofa with our leg tucked under us, and we sat there for 10 minutes, obsessed about The Crown or whatever the latest thing is we're watching, which I'm obsessed with at the moment. And then, so a lot of that can be because we've, for a moment, limited blood flow, and it can sometimes be to do with the way that we're stretching a nerve in a particular position. It doesn't always feel that comfortable, does it? So part of it might be our nervous system giving us feedback that we kind of reached a limit for a moment. So if you're doing a stretch and you start to feel pins and needles, it's a good sign to notice that that's kind of your edge, and you don't want to push it any further. And I guess it's a similar conversation with cramp. So sometimes we can feel cramp and we can go, oh my God, what's happening? And it's often just our body kind of giving us some signals. Cramp is often our body telling us that, our nervous system trying to figure out what is this new experience. So it can be making a movement for the first time or using a certain muscle group in a certain way for the first time. And our nervous system has to kind of catch up and we experience cramp. So yeah, I think we can just use all of these sensations as ways to slowly learn about our body. And it helps to give us some idea of if we're making the right choices again in that moment or not. So yeah.
So it's good feedback. Thank you.
I would just see it as good feedback. And again, if we experience pins and needles a lot, it might be something you want to see a medical professional about. But if you're getting them in a certain instance, making a certain movement, I think it's just information that we can use to help us in that moment. I would say, yeah.
Nice.
I'm loving all these questions, by the way. It's great because it helps me, keeps me on my toes. And
I love this. Ötzi is the biopsychosocial model really helps to formulate a picture of what's going on when it comes to pain. The psychological element is often overlooked, I think. And that's exactly what you're saying, Andrew. Yeah. I'm learning to live with some of the limitations, especially in my right hip. Do you think I will cause an imbalance in various muscles if I work my left hip harder and I'm gentler on my right hip?
No, I don't think so. I think, and believe it or not, you can actually do a whole practice on one side. Like, you don't have to always do the right and the left. Just
against the rules of yoga.
Against the rules. Look, obviously, if you're only ever going to practice doing trikonasana on one side, for 10 years, yeah, it's going to have some impact on you. But, I think there's this really wonderful freedom that comes when you just get on the mat and you just connect with what you need in that moment and you just move, And yeah, I think it's absolutely fine to work one side harder and just see what the results are like, see how it makes you feel. And if it works for you, keep doing it. And if it doesn't work so well, then you can, try something a bit more traditional. I think just have fun, explore, listen to your body, but just keep moving, movement is medicine at the end of the day. As long as you're moving, I'm happy. And hopefully your body will be happy too.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. There was a question on the movers group, our lovely group, about osteoporosis. And it was from my lovely mother. So I'm going to forward that one. Yeah. So basically, she was looking for some yoga poses, things that might help reduce the osteoporosis that she is starting to experience, aged 80 now.
Yeah. Oh wow, she looks amazing for 80, isn't she?
I know,
You've
right?
got good genes there, Kat.
Yes.
Yeah. So osteoporosis is a word that a lot of you will be familiar with. You might not know exactly what it means. It's essentially decreased bone mineral density, and the issue with it, really, the big issue is that it can also lead to increased risk of fracture. Okay, so if your bones are really healthy and you don't have any sign of osteoporosis and you fall over and land on your hip, it's going to hurt, but the likelihood of fracturing your hip is very, very low. If you have osteoporosis and you fall over on your hip, you've got a much higher chance of fracturing your hip, and that's something you really, really don't want to have happen to you. So that's something to bear in mind. I think the great news is there's been a fair amount of research looking at yoga for osteoporosis, and it's really good news. And there's actually been this 10-year study that suggests that yoga can even begin to reverse the bone changes that have happened because of osteoporosis. So not only can it potentially prevent osteoporosis from happening, but it can also reverse the signs once osteoporosis has begun. So that's something really, really wonderful. Yoga is healthy stress on the bones. So bones apply to a law: use it or lose it. So if you don't use your bones, they weaken. But also, if you completely overdo it and you suddenly add a huge load or have a huge fall or have a car accident, then of course you can have a big issue and you can have a fracture. But basically, there's this beautiful sweet spot in between where the more you use the bone, the healthier and the stronger it becomes. It basically adapts to your needs. So yoga is wonderful. I would recommend practicing with a teacher who is experienced and who has knowledge of osteoporosis. I would, as a starting point, focus more on a floor-based practice. So you can do lots of wonderful things on the floor. As you can tell, if any of you have practiced my classes on movement for life, most of it's floor-based. I love being on the floor. Chair-based yoga is wonderful. Now, it doesn't mean you can't do a traditional practice, but just something to bear in mind, that there is that slight increased risk of fracture. So if you're practicing balance poses, I would recommend doing a balance with a chair or doing it against a wall, having support. You want to keep the spine moving, but the vertebrae of the spine do have an increased risk of fracture. So while cat-cow on all fours or in a chair is wonderful for the spine, you might want to be mindful of rolling up and down the spine from a standing position, because that can put a little bit too much weight and pressure on each individual vertebra as you roll up and down. And in a sun salutation, be mindful of folding with your arms reached out in front of you, because you're adding the weight of your arms to the spine as you fold. You might want to do the hands down through the heart center, or hands on hips as you fold. So just being mindful of how much weight you're actually applying to different parts of your body. And but keep moving. Moving is, again, super, super, super important. And not moving is just as problematic as moving too much.
Yeah, that's great. That's really, really useful. Thank you. I think I saw we had another good one. Oh, Raki is going to keep her more left field questions. Good. Thanks for the help.
I think what Raki asked me a couple of years ago in this group was something like, why do we think, or something that was hilarious. I was just like, oh my God. I was like, she kind of thinks that she thinks I'm literally the fountain of all knowledge, and I can answer these like really kind of amazing.
Tell me you're not. Yeah, you are. We all know that, Dr. Yogi.
I definitely have my limitations, trust me.
Okay, what she said. Love how our body talks to us, and isn't yoga the perfect tool? Love the message to not be scared and fearful of our bodies. Yes.
Yeah, for me, it's all about introspection. So a big part of the practice is going
Mm,
inwards, and it's
mm,
about learning to tune in and
mm,
listen to my body. And that can be a very, very slow journey for people,
mm,
particularly people with hypermobility have a
mhm,
very challenging time with that. But I think that with practice and with time, we can slowly become better at learning about our body, tuning in, listening to it, and responding. So I
mm.
think it's all about just taking responsibility for ourselves where we can.
I really love that. Thank you. Great question here from Patricia. Thank you very much for asking.
Hi,
What
Patricia.
are your thoughts on squatting for pregnant ladies? I have heard both side good and bad. Any thoughts, Andrew?
Yeah, again, like it's, different things are going to work for different people. Different things
Mhm,
are going to feel difficult or unhelpful for someone, but feel really great for another. So I would experiment with it. There are loads of different ways to squat as well. So we have this, when we think of squatting, we go to the literally kind of unassisted, deep squat with our bum down by our heels.
mm,
You can squat in lots of different ways. You can squat supporting your heels onto blocks.
mhm,
Yeah, so your feet are slightly pointed, your heels are lifted and supported. You can also experiment squatting in a chair and then leaning your body weight forward. So it doesn't have to be like the full-on kind of version that we can imagine. But what I would do is I would maybe start with squatting from your sofa or from your chair, and
mhm,
have a little play with how that feels for your body. Maybe then work up to squatting with your heels lifted, and then take it step by step. And I think it just, again, all comes down to how does that experience feel for you. How does it feel in the moment? How does it feel in the days after?
mhm,
Yeah, I think, again, um freedom to play with that. I think that there's a lot of fear around pregnancy and relaxin, which is the
mhm,
hormone that comes in to basically, help with all the physical changes in the body, but then also help with the delivery of the baby. And we don't have a ton of research about how relaxin actually affects our joints and ligaments.
mm.
So there's some general guidance that we can give, but at the end of the day, it's still something that we in the science world don't know a ton about, and hopefully we'll know more over time. And it's going to come down to the individual. Yeah,
Mhm.
I would make a very good politician. I'm basically very good at kind of slightly dodging the answer.
Yeah, can I just say you would make an awesome politician. In fact, can you please take charge over here? I think that
Sure.
that's absolutely what we all need is more yoga. Less politics, more yoga. So right now, we've got another couple of great questions from the movers group. Yvonne asks, what's the most unique stroke memorable adjustment you have offered in class and why? I love this.
Yeah, it's a
Memorable.
great question. I saw that, and I love Yvonne too. So
Yeah, yeah. Big
big
love
kiss to
to
Yvonne.
everyone.
I'm so glad to see her now doing classes with you, which is great.
Oh my goodness,
Um,
she is an amazing teacher.
yeah, I'm really excited. I'm really excited to take some of her restorative classes. So
Yeah.
thank you for bringing her into the fold. Yeah, I think this is a great question. This is very personal to me, but I am not a big physical adjuster. And obviously with the climate that we're in, we're not going to be touching people anyway. At the moment we're not teaching in person in most of the places in the world, but even when we are, we're not going to be touching people. So for me, I'm not really big on, I love touching, hugging my friends and family, but I'm not big on touching people. I think there's the whole thing about consent. And I
Mhm,
think consent also needs to be continuous. So just
mhm,
because you've asked someone's consent at the start of a class, it doesn't mean then you have free reign to touch them the whole time. You need to, each time you want to touch someone, you need to ask their permission. So I think there's that
mhm,
element that comes into it. And also, I think so, but where I think, so I know I'm kind of scooping around the question again, but I just think this is an important topic to touch on. I
mhm,
think touch is valuable. I think touch can help bring attention to a certain body area for someone, so it can help draw focus. It can be helpful as a directional cue for someone. I think we should avoid using our hands to actually apply force to people's body. I don't think that's
mhm.
always a helpful thing. So
Yeah.
basically, I don't really physically adjust people. That's my thing, and it doesn't mean that I'm saying that it's wrong to do that. This is a whole other topic. So that's a really difficult question for me to answer. I think I try to use verbal cues much more, and I think the cues that I enjoy using and that people seem to get the most benefit from is me reflecting back to them. So I think it's one of our jobs as a teacher to look at what people are doing in front of us and to reflect back. So often I will notice that people are in a particular position and they just look thoroughly miserable. Okay. So they basically look like I've just slapped them across the face, or they look like they're constipated. So I use when I'm in a class scenario, I use that as a chance to reflect back to people and go, you know, a lot of you just look like you're having the worst experience of your entire life. So what is that telling you about the choices you're making in this moment? Like, are you in the right position right now? Are you overdoing it? Are you not connecting to your breath? So I think I try to have some fun, but also use it as a learning tool for everyone to kind of reflect back. So again, kind of not sure if I fully answered the question, but
I like that. I like that. This is another great question from Kerry, who is one of our movers. So hiya, Kerry.
Hi, Kerry.
How can you help students to tell the difference between safe, effective stretching and stretching that causes injury? This is a great question.
It's a great question, yeah. So the fascinating thing about stretching and about muscle is that we can imagine that we know all the answers, and the scientists over the years have like researched this in so much depth that we know everything. There's so much about stretching that we just don't know. It's really, really interesting. I'm so excited to see over the next few decades more and more information that we can gather about this. I think for me, stretching is overrated. So stretching can feel really good. And it does have certain benefits. It can increase flexibility. That's great. I think also flexibility is kind of overrated. I think it gets to a certain point that's useful, and then beyond that, it's not useful. You know, I used to practice Ashtanga too. I used to be fixated with getting my legs behind my head. You know, how does this help us? You know, if you want to scratch the back of your head, you know, do it with your hand. You don't need your foot to do it. So, yeah. So it's really, really interesting. I think when we look at stretching, we can look at more passive stretching, and we can look at more active stretching. So it's like a pendulum, okay? And passive stretching is essentially when we either use gravity, we use our body weight, or we use external force to kind of hold us in a position. And then active stretching is when we use more of our muscle strength to hold us in a certain pose. So an example would be, if you imagine that you're standing and you raise one leg in front of you, and you either hold on to your foot or you use a strap to hold yourself in the position, you can lift your leg reasonably high. But if you let go of your foot, you're going to struggle to hold it there. You're going to have to lower it in order to keep it in position. Yeah. So the first example is more of a passive stretch, and then the second is more an example of a more active stretch. So in the past, research was telling us that flexibility, so the more passive side, was going to help us with injury prevention and had all these benefits. And then actually the research has changed, and we're now realizing that the focus is more on active stretching opposed to passive. Now, it does not mean that passive stretching is bad. There's no black or whites when it comes here. What I would say is we can use this then to inform our practice. So if you realize that most of your practice on a daily or regular basis is in more of the passive end, you might find benefit from adding more active stretches into your regime. So another example would that be supine pigeon when you're on your back, yeah, and you have one ankle crossed over. I wish I could kind of demonstrate this for you. I hopefully most of you know what I mean by supine pigeon. When we're supine pigeon, what we want to do automatically is grab hold of the thigh and pull it back towards us, yeah, and we get that kind of sometimes intense stretch. So first of all, get into the position, but don't hold on to the thigh. So keep the thigh in position just because of muscular activation, and see how that feels. And then the second stage can be to use your arms as a lever to pull in a little bit closer. So you've done a more active position, and then you've moved into a passive position. So I think it's about guiding people and helping people to understand the difference between passive and active, giving them lots of wonderful examples of how to do this, and then allowing them once again to explore for themselves and see what works.
Great.
Does that make sense? Am I making any sense?
I like it because I like that reminder to use the muscles even when you're stretching.
Yeah.
That's what I got from that.
Yeah. And it's not bad to do it in a more passive way, but if that's only what you're ever doing, then you're kind of missing a trick. You're missing this wonderful opportunity to also engage the muscles a little bit more, and also potentially build up strength in the meantime. So yeah. But yeah, but stretching is overrated. Have a think about that.
Absolutely.
Yoga is not all about stretching. We know that for sure.
Oh my goodness. I slightly want to ask you the meaning of life and the meaning of yoga now.
And why we think.
But instead of doing that, I want to ask you Emma's question, which is much more down to earth and relevant. What would you say is good alignment for the head and neck in chaturanga? Sometimes my head and gaze is down, other times I look forward.
Love it. Yeah, and I love that. So what I love about this, Emma, is that you're listening to your body and you're willing to adapt and know that there isn't kind of one ideal. So there isn't one position that's always going to feel good. It's going to vary day by day, and it's also going to vary person by person. So what I do is, instead of telling people what to do, I try to give them options. Yeah. So, and that can be based on various things, and often it's coming down to what feels good for your head and neck. Extending the neck. So I'm just going to move to the side so you can see. So taking the head back is a natural movement, and it's something that your neck wants you to do regularly to keep it healthy. But I think we want to do that with control. There's so many amazing vessels running up and down the neck, blood vessels, nerves. We've obviously got our windpipe, and there's so much stuff going on. We've got our vertebra, our spinal cord. So for me, it's all about control. I don't love seeing people dropping their head back without control. And I think if people were to really tune into that, most people would realize that it actually doesn't feel that wonderful. So keep moving the neck, but do it with control, and give yourself permission to decide each time you practice what option is going to feel it feels right for you or not. So sometimes, go a little bit deeper, take the head further back. Sometimes keep your gaze forward. Other times you can even keep your chin tucked into your chest. Yeah. So no right or wrong, but just be willing to experiment and play with it.
And I'm going to add to that, camel. In camel, I hate dropping my head back. I think it feels weird. Is that another one where you're going to give me permission to not do that?
I'm going to give you permission to do it, and I'm going to suggest that people don't lead the movement with their head. Because there's so much range of movement in the neck. What people can often do is they drop their head back and they think that's them doing a back bend. Well, what about the rest of the spine? So what I would suggest is keep the head stable, the neck stable. Find the extension, and then once you're in a comfortable position, then if you want to, play with this and move the head. But often people lead with the head. It's the same the twist. People twist their head round and they think that's it. Keep the chin in line with the chest. Move the rest of the spine first, and then if it feels comfortable, move the neck. That's a good rule of thumb, I think.
That sounds that sounds sensible and straightforward. Thank you. Racky's got another good question. Thank
Racky.
you. How would you suggest people refresh their knowledge and not rely too much on dogma?
Yes. So that's a great thing. Well, look, I've got 2 books coming out early next year. So read my books if you want to refresh your knowledge. Yeah. Look, I think the beautiful thing about Movement for Life is that we have teachers from all over the world and from every different school of yoga. So experiment and play with the different styles, and you will glean something new and something different from every teacher and from every style of yoga. So, just keep mixing it up. When I'm, say, researching online, I try to avoid people that are giving me a definitive yes or no, because very, very rarely we can answer things that clearly. It's basically yes, no, maybe. So I love to see people who try to look at all sides of it and give like a balanced picture. But if someone is saying to you, this is right and this is wrong for the body, I personally would step away from it, because I just, that's just not my way of thinking about anything in the body. There's basically, no natural movement is inherently bad. It's something that I always stick to. And if someone is trying to tell me that something is right and something's wrong, something's good and something's bad, I step away and take a breath. So yeah, I'm not one for dogma. I just, yeah.
I like
So
that.
I hope that helps. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I agree. I think having a sort of multidisciplinary approach, more of a buffet, like what feels right.
yeah, a
That's
buffet.
kind of why I set up Movement for Modern Life, because I like
Yeah.
a buffet.
And look, if you're on the Movers Facebook group, keep using that, because teachers will engage with you, ask questions, and you'll have different teachers from different backgrounds and different experiences that will help you to kind of answer the question, and then you can pull all that information together and then decide for yourself. When I was at medical school, I don't think I asked one question for the whole experience. I just basically was spoon fed and took it all in. I think ask questions, challenge yourself, challenge your teachers, and just keep just keep challenging yourself in that way.
And keep bugging people with questions. I think that's it. I think
Keep bugging people with questions.
I think
That's
it's
what we're all here
it's a
for.
good thing. Absolutely. Another great question. Now, this one I feel is probably going to be last question of the evening, because it's such a good one. I wonder if you could touch on breathing, how the fascia of deep muscles are connected to the diaphragm, how breathing can help release deep muscles like the psoas major. Working from home in recent months, I've invested time in my breathing to help with lower back and hip stiffness. Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
I love this question.
Beautiful question. And it's really interesting. Like I, have done a lot of pranayama breath work practice over the years. It hasn't been something that's always been a super regular part of my practice, but over the last year, I've been doing much, much more dedicated breath work, and it's been a game changer. I think, breathwork is literally one of the best ways to reset your nervous system and to deal with stress and just to cope with all of the craziness that's going on everywhere in the world. So I think it's a really wonderful time to invest some more energy into looking at how we breathe. Yeah, this is a beautiful question. So if you think of your respiratory diaphragm as being this beautiful dome that sits just under your rib cage, then at the bottom of your abdomen, just underneath at the base of your pelvis, you have the pelvic diaphragm, your pelvic floor. So you have these two domes that sit on each other, and essentially as you inhale, the respiratory diaphragm subtly flattens, as does the pelvic diaphragm, and then as you exhale, they both dome. So they're essentially designed to kind of work in tandem with each other, which is really, really beautiful. So that's an example of these muscles that are reasonably far away. They're interconnected. They're on the same rhythm. So one way to connect into that is to do a seated meditation, and close your eyes if that feels comfortable, and start to visualize those two diaphragms subtly moving up and down as you inhale and exhale. And that's a really beautiful way to begin to connect to these deeper parts of the body. The psoas is an amazing muscle. It's no more interesting than any other muscle in the body. So the psoas tends to be one of the favorites for everyone. It's fascinating, but it's no more fascinating than any other part of the body. why there's so much intrigue about it is because the psoas is the only muscle that directly connects the spine to the lower limbs, and it has this long passage. So it actually originates along the lumbar spine and essentially connects with fascia to the respiratory diaphragm. And then it runs down the length of the lumbar spine, crosses over the pelvis, it crosses over part of the sacroiliac joint that we mentioned earlier, and then inserts into the front of the hips. So yeah, so it's amazing. So when we have tightness or pain in our psoas, this can potentially affect the way we breathe. And then when we have issues with our breath, this can also affect the psoas. And the same goes for kidneys and our adrenal glands that sit on top of the kidneys. They're all connected by a fascia to the psoas. So when we have a lot of stress in our life, this can impact the psoas. And when we, again, have issues with our psoas, this can potentially affect the way we deal with stress or with our stress levels. So, you know, just have this in mind. I think this is a beautiful visualization practice to think of, even when you're doing a more relaxing practice. Even when you're taking the shavasana, you can begin to visualize all these elements. And yeah, and this can also help with this introspection. It can also help us to go inside. When we're able to kind of roughly know where these parts of the bodies are, then we can begin to visualize them. And this can also help us to start to build awareness and tune into these different elements. So yeah.
I really love that. I think if I sort of was a recap in my disembodied way, I feel so funny that I can't be seen, but I can see you, Andrew. But so I'm sorry about that again, folks, if you caught on late for me being a bit disembodied today. But what I have caught from today's conversation is that yoga is not about the stretch. It's about the introspection. It's a chance to really look in at ourselves and how are we feeling and what feels right for us, using our visualization, and not to be too much like what's right, what's wrong, how should I do this, how should I not do this, but use it as an opportunity to really check in with our body on this day. How does this feel to me, with no shoulds?
Yeah,
summary?
Give yourself permission, you know. I think it's beautiful. Thank you for summing it up. I think it's a beautiful thing. And again, that's the beautiful thing about movement for modern life, is that we're helping cultivate awareness in people, because all of you wonderful practitioners at home are having to take responsibility for yourselves. Like, we're not there telling you, oh no, that's going to hurt your knee, you know, or whatever. So I think this is a great thing about practicing at home or wherever you are, is that you have to take responsibility. And I'm sure most of you have noticed that your body awareness has changed quite drastically in a wonderful way, and you know, over time. And I think that's, you know, that's an amazing thing. You take ownership for your body, you feel more in your body, and then you can connect with deeper elements of yourself, you know. So
that's beautiful. Yeah, thank you. And
pleasure.
yeah, I love it. And the use of visualization is so important as well. I love that. So Andrew, thank you so much. It's wonderful to see you looking so well out in LA, and it's wonderful to hear that you have, is that right, 2 books coming out?
Yeah, I've had a pretty prolific year. So, you know, I don't want to make anyone feel bad, you know, that they haven't written 2 books during quarantine. But the thing is, I had already basically blocked it this year to write 2 books. So this has been in the pipeline for quite a while. And, you know, so way before the pandemic hit, this was my kind of job for the year. So yeah, so 2 books. One book is written. The second book is like 95% done. So the first book gets published in March, and it's all about supporting injured students. So it is for yoga teachers, but it's also for the interested practitioner. So it's full of practical stuff. It's full of accessible anatomy. Hopefully it's going to be a bit of a Bible, you know, for people, and a yoga Bible. And yeah, and then the second book is on yoga physiology. So really the science behind how yoga interacts with all of the systems of the body, looking at it from like a research perspective, but in a really accessible way. Yeah. So I'm really excited about those being launched next year. So
Oh, it sounds
keep
amazing.
you
I hope you come to
posted.
the UK and do a book tour with a book signing, and we can all come along. That would be
I
awesome.
hope so. Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I'll
well,
keep you all
fingers crossed
posted.
we'll all be
Yeah.
freer in 2021. So listen, with no further ado, I really thank you very, very much, everybody, for your amazing questions, which also provided us all with so much insight. And
Yeah,
Hugh,
thank you for that.
and thank you, Andrew, for sharing your immense wisdom with us. I really
Of course. And I've really enjoyed this. Let's schedule in another one at some point. It'd be nice
Yay!
to reconnect with everyone.
And I will work out how the camera works for that.
I know we've missed your lovely face today.
I know.
Yeah, thank you to everyone for their questions. Thank you, Kat, for creating such an amazing platform and amazing community. It's wonderful to be part of that. And even though I'm, halfway across the world in California, I feel part of that family. So it's beautiful.
Yeah, you are part of the family, as are all of you guys who have watched, listened, supported us along every step of the way. So thank you to everybody.
Beautiful.
All right, have a wonderful evening or morning, everyone, and take care of yourselves.
Happy Thanksgiving.
And happy Thanksgiving. Take care.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. Bye.